Hello there, world of tankers, and welcome to the channel. I'm your host, the Droodles Blitz, and in today's video, I'll be doing a full-down review on the Tier 10 German Super Heavy, the E100. In today's video, I'm going to be helping out beginners or people that just want to edge up their skills for this Tier 10 tank. We're going to be talking about its statistics, how I load my equipment on this tank, and as well, we're going to be showcasing some Ace Tanker gameplay, followed by the armor profile. So this video is going to have the whole shebang. It's going to let you know everything you need to about this vehicle. We're going to start off with the statistics of the E100. It carries two guns, and, well, let's be honest, the 12.8 just isn't a gun option you should ever even think about running. Sure, it might have slightly better DPM, it might have better dispersion, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't have alpha. The alpha capabilities of the E100 basically says, hey, you don't want to poke me, I'm going to hit you really, really hard. And it also means that the poor 2,330 DPM isn't put to waste because people aren't going to rush you when you shoot them for 640 damage. Now, when we take a look at the aiming time at 4.7 seconds, and as well the dispersion at 0.380, it very clearly paints a picture of this being one of the least accurate vehicles in Tier 10, right up there with the FE2 and 5B183 and the 60 TP. Now, accuracy is very important. However, for a vehicle like the E100, I wouldn't actually say it's that detrimental. First of all, the E100 only goes 30, and it's actually fairly aimed in when you're driving it, which makes it not too bad at actually shooting shots on the move. But more specifically, you should be running this tank in the front line. This is a frontline super heavy. That's why you got just about 3,000 hit points with it. So you should be using those hit points in the front line, and if you are there, then missing shots isn't really going to be too easy if the opponent's only 50 to 100 meters away from you. So yeah, not too bad at all in the dispersion as long as you are using it like a frontline super heavy. When it comes to the reload time, very long, 16.5 seconds. That's why it's got such a poor DPM. However, there are ways of increasing the DPM. First of all, you can fire high explosive. Your HE does 960 damage, so if you manage to penetrate a high explosive shell, let's say on a grill 15 or on the side or rear of a medium/heavy, you will increase your DPM drastically by an extra almost 400. That is a very, very large buff to your DPM, and as well, this tank weighs in at 130 tons, meaning that you could very easily ram opponents. You just tap a medium or a heavy tank that's lighter than you, let's say a T57 heavy, and you'll probably take about 250 off, which is actually quite a decent chunk when you add in the 640 alpha you have. So there are ways of increasing your DPM with these super heavies, but even if you only have that base 2,330, if you put it into perspective and you're in a battle that only lasts 3 minutes, if you were shooting all of those 3 minutes nonstop, you could deal almost 7,000 damage just by penetrating AP shells. So overall, DPM is only important if you need it to constantly shoot. But for a vehicle like the E100 that's got a long reload and a big alpha, it gives you plenty of time to decide what you're going to do and who you're going to poke while you are reloading. Now, when it comes to the penetration values, it's actually really good. 271 on the standard is not bad at all. It's enough to penetrate most mediums and heavies in the front, and if you are coming up against vehicles like the Type 71 or a 60 TP upper plate, and you gotta load heat, 367 millimeters with calibrated shells is more than enough to penetrate through basically anything you'll be aiming at, especially because this is quite a tall vehicle, meaning that you're actually going to be aiming down on enemy angled sloped plates, which is going to make it even easier to penetrate their frontal armor. Finally, we have the high explosive penetration, which is 94 millimeters. It's a little bit lower than vehicles like the Object 268, which carry also a 150 millimeter cannon. That vehicle has 99 millimeters of pen, but to be fair, 94 is still plenty to cut through most opponents' rears and anything that you could splash. It'll do a really solid job. Gun depression wise, 7 degrees and 20 degrees of gun elevation, making this actually a very flexible tank. You wouldn't think it is because it's this big old box, but no, it's actually got a lot of flexibility, can work most ridge lines, and as well, it can aim above it quite easily. When we make our way to the mobility, it has a top speed of 30 kilometers per hour and 15 in reverse. The top speed is actually not too bad because it's got a decent power to weight of 10.8, giving it an average speed of 25. The E100 is not too bad feeling on its mobility, judging that you realize this tank weighs, again, 130 tons. You wouldn't expect this tank to go any faster than 30, so not too bad at all. hull traverse rate is 34.5 degrees a second, and when you pair that as well with the turret traverse rate of 20 degrees a second, that is over 50 degrees a second, 55, which is plenty to deal with any medium flanking you. It's actually really, really insane traverse speed. I don't know why, as a super heavy, it turns this quick, but it's an amazing thing, especially when you're trying to side scrape and very quickly get some wiggles or bounces. So the final thing we want to showcase is the armor profile before we break into the gameplay. So the armor profile on the E100 on paper looks very bad. You can see a 60 TP using calibrated with heat, having around 300 and let's say 60-ish millimeters of heat pen. It can very easily butter straight through the turret. However, the E100 turret is a big old box, which means that what you want to do is just angle the turret, and there you go. If you angle the turret just at about 30 degrees, 29, 30 degrees, you just want to line up this little corner, basically parallel, or should I just say a straight line to the front of your tank. If you're able to do that, as you can see, the frontal armor on this vehicle towards whatever is aiming at you is going to be basically impervious. And judging that most vehicles like the 60 TP are lower than you, they're going to be looking at you like this, making that upper plate and turret impervious. The only spot that's actually a big weak spot is the lower plate at 233 and the turret ring. The turret ring is still something you have to keep in mind with. If you face hug opponents with the E100, that turret ring specifically is a very, very weak spot, and you gotta keep that in mind because you can penetrate it. You can see at certain angles, even with AP ammo, that turret ring becomes very, very weak. So just keep that in mind. When people are face hugging you, they might go for that turret ring. Now, when it comes to mediums aiming at the E100, specifically any medium, they cannot penetrate your frontal armor. It's just not going to happen. Even with heat shells, they're not going to pen your turret. It's never, ever going to happen after Wargame being buffed the armor, especially if you just slightly angle it like this. I mean, the whole turret is completely red. So overall, the E100 armor is fantastic on the turret. It's able to bounce heat shells from heavies, even tank destroyers half the time. And another great thing about the E100's armor is that it's completely spaced on the sides, meaning that vehicles like the 183 are not going to be able to cut HESH shells through this at all, or through the tracks. The only spot you're going to be able to HESH in a 183 is the side of this big old boxy turret. So overall, the armor on this tank is fantastic. If you get it into a side scrape and you put the turret sideways and you just side scrape the tank like this, no matter what, heat shells are not going to penetrate you. And as long as you don't show this little corner here on the turret, you're basically impervious. So the U100 is just fantastic at being a brute force. Its lower plate is really the only large weak spot after the turret buff of update 9.1. So overall, I would say that the U100 is fantastic on its frontal armor. And if you're a player that understands after watching this video or already understood how to angle it, you're going to do fine. Also, with the 7 degrees of gun depression, once again, you're not going to penetrate this turret with any medium, being over 346 thick. So pretty impressive armor when it comes to the E100. Mainly, the playstyle is just don't show your lower plate. It's that simple. You can angle it, you can try and wiggle it, not to get that lower plate hit, but that is the biggest weak spot, is 100% that lower plate. If you expose it, you will be penetrated. The final thing we should talk about is my equipment loadout and consumables. This is a German Super Heavy, and as you can see, its track wheels are huge. You should be running 2 repair kits. It's basically mandatory. You don't need engine power boost. Getting into position 2 seconds faster in the slowest heavies in the game is not going to make a difference. Run adrenaline so you can get that little extra DPM and possibly squeeze a little faster shell out, and as well, run repair kits. Second of all, provisions, you should be running fuel because it does help you accelerate a lot faster. You should also be running chocolate bar and chocolate, double food and fuel. Finally, we have my equipment loadout. Now, I am running calibrated. Running rammer on this vehicle is pointless. You're getting an extra 176 damage per minute, which is basically nothing in terms of this vehicle's reload. You're shaving off 1 second, but you're losing 33 millimeters of standard, or 33 millimeters of heat, 13 millimeters of standard, and 9 millimeters of high explosive pen. You're losing so much, it's not worth it. You should just definitely run calibrated. Make sure your shells pen, especially, you'll thank me when you're able to connect an HE. Aiming time, always. Enhanced gun laying drive. You don't really need supercharger as long as you learn how to lead your shots. And V-stabs versus refined gun, I would suggest vertical stabilizer, judging down to the fact that you're constantly moving in this vehicle. You're not sitting still, you're going to be moving, so keep that in mind. Finally, we have the improved modules on vitality. So you should be running improved modules down to the fact that it takes off about 20% of your damage from ramming. This one does not help you with ramming damage. It helps you with like ammo racks, which, let's be real, you don't get ammo racks in a vehicle like the E100. Next up, we have improved assembly, 185 extra hit points, or you can run enhanced armor. I like running the hit points because it's 2900, and I feel like this vehicle still gets very easily penetrated when it's exposed, so I'd run improved assembly. Finally, we have toolbox in the vitality section. This increases your track repair speed. Run it every time. Over into specialization, improved optics. There's no way you'd run camo net on this vehicle. Engine accelerator to get into position faster a little bit. You can run improved control, but as you'll notice, it barely gives you a buff over the hull traverse buff that engine accelerator gives you. And finally, I would run consumable delivery system, giving you 15% cooldown speed of consumables and deliveries, letting you get your repair kits back faster if you have used them. So now we're going to break into the replays. Our first battle is on Castilla, a map that I really like the look of. Unfortunately, looks don't always translate into a super fun playstyle, and when using a vehicle like the E100 on Castilla, yeah, going up Sea Hill can be a death sentence sometimes. For example, the enemy team has 4 heavies. They got an E100, a 60 TP, a T110 E5, and a Type 71. So they got a lot of heavily armored vehicles. They also have an FE2 and 5B 183, and it's usually common sense that any tank destroyer, specifically vehicles like the 183, are going to sit on these ridge lines here, or parallel on the other map over there. So you got to be really careful, because if a 183 is sitting up there and I try to climb up this hill, I'm basically just dying. That's all I'm doing. I'm giving the 183 free shells into my armor, taking 1/3 of my health off. You never, ever want to put a super heavy in the line of a tank destroyer, because that's one of the major ways to chunk out your HP and just lose all the capabilities you have. So instead, you can see I'm pushing with my team over towards base A. Now, I was thinking, do I want to capture base A or push past? I decided to push past. The 100, as you can see, it only goes 30, and its power to weight isn't amazing. It's decent, but it's nothing crazy. So I'm going to use the time I can to get ahead of my teammates, so maybe I can get the jump on, for example, the M48 Patton or the Leopard 1, and possibly get a shell in. Now, right now, I know that I'm never going to get a shell into that Leopard, because that guy can just back right up. However, you'll notice the Patton is kind of stuck at where he currently is, so I'm just going to drive all the way around this corner. I'm hoping that the 183 is not sitting at C. Doesn't look like he is, and boom! Nice shell into the enemy M48 Patton. Now, that Patton has put himself in a really poor situation, and specifically also gets tracked by the 57 Heavy, clearing him from the battlefield. Now we have the 183 in front of us, and you'll see I specifically angled my tank down on this little ridge here, and there's one very specific reason why. I know for a fact that the 183, if it fires AP, is going to pen me every single time. However, Hesh is the very, very scary part of a 183. I don't want to lose 1300 damage from that vehicle. I really, really don't have that in my biggest of interest. So I wedged my lower plate down. That way there was no possibility of the 183 overmatching my lower plate with a Hesh shell and penetrating it. That's something you should definitely keep in mind when using a vehicle like the E100, is that you don't expose your lower plate in an upward angle, because if you do, a vehicle like the 183 can Hesh pen it, or let's say even maybe the 2 and 5B at certain angles. So definitely keep that in mind. Now in front of us we have the T110 E5. You'll see I angled my turret to the side and perfectly got a bounce from that E5. He must not be running calibrated, because I'm running enhanced armor, not making my turret incredibly strong, but still strong enough to get a bounce. Previously, you would not have been able to do that before update 9.1. So we're up to 1700 damage. So far, not a lot. I'm trying to angle again. Nice block from the 183. Now that's hopefully going to give my team the confidence to clear that FE2 and 5B. Perfect. 57 Heavy finishes him off. I'm going to aim in a nice shell into the lower plate of that T110 E5 and start turning around. You can see here the decent mobility of this vehicle. For a Super Heavy, it turns pretty dang fast. I mean, it's similar to the traverse speed of a vehicle like the IS-7, which is, yeah, pretty fast when you think about it. So we saw that Type 71 was driving down the hill. There you go. Type showcases his tank. We get a nice, almost max roll of 782 damage into his vehicle. Now, our Sheridan is kind of behind us, and I think that Sheridan continued to be behind us for a little bit, but it's fine, because the Sheridan weighs like 16 tons. It's one of the lightest vehicles in the game, so it's not very hard for me to get him out of my way. Sheridan's going to aim it on his lower plate, and boom, gets a nice penetration. Unfortunately, you did see it looked like our shell just went a teeny bit off from the location I wanted it to when shooting at that Type 71, but there you go. I used this type to angle against the enemy E100 in the back, and with that, we went from 1700 damage, which what you just saw, now to 3700, and we still have 1200 hit points left. That's a lot of HP. Now, we do get shot in the side by the enemy 60, but because we're running hit points, we have enough health to still, on average, at least take a shell from the enemy E100. Bit of a bad shot for me there. I was kind of hoping that he wouldn't shoot just yet, and I was just going to be able to shoot him in the lower plate. But at this point, I'm thinking, well, what do I want to do? I'm just pushing this dead Patton a little bit closer, a little bit closer. I know that it's very possible that E100 can high roll me, but if I don't show my lower plate, he can't pen me unless he's firing a heat shell, meaning that I'm not going to be in the range of a one-shot. So I'm just going to angle my turret, stay at the spot like this, hope that he doesn't pen me. Still waiting, still waiting. We're up to 4,400 damage, which is pretty good so far. 3 more seconds, and yeah, this guy, he's not doing great. We're going to get a nice shell to the Leopard. I was going to shoot that E100, but might as well take the shot when you get it, right? So long live the Leopard. And again, just angling my vehicle. Now, at this point in the battle, we got a little bit unfortunate, because as you'll notice, the enemy, or not the enemy, but just the base capture is at 980. Our teammates are not very close. They're all the way over there. And it is kind of unfortunate because we could have definitely gotten like at least another 2 shells into this guy, bringing our damage total up another 1,200. But either way, this was a really good battle to showcase on a map like Castilla how you can take advantage of the enemy team and use the E100. We did 5,500 damage in total, came out with a victory, and as well you can see pulled out a mastery, which is pretty dang sweet. We only blocked 1,600, but this wasn't a game about blocking damage. It was a game of showing how you outposition your enemy. Even if you're in a map like Castilla, you should definitely take advantage and notice what the enemy team's going to do. So clear the mediums, because you're not going to clear the heavies, especially when your heavies are also pushing towards medium side. So we took advantage of that, came out with a victory, did our job, and there you go. For our second battle, we are on Himmelsdorf. Now, up against us, we have an AMX 50B, a Chieftain Mark 6, a Type 57 Heavy, and a Type 68 for the heavy lineup. You specifically want to make sure what heavies you're going to be fighting, because let's say you're up against this lineup here, where the heavies are quite mobile. Well, you should expect the majority of the time they're less heavily armored vehicles to go, especially on a map like Himmelsdorf, probably over towards A side, where the mediums would most likely go. That's just quite common sense. But I do have a mouse on my team. Wargaming gave us a lot of super heavies, so I'm like, you know what? I might as well go down D alleyway and just speed on through. If you're quick enough and you don't get held up by anybody driving over here, and you don't stop, you don't worry, you shouldn't have to worry in a vehicle like the E100. I keep driving until I spot something, and when I spot it, that's when it's my problem. So you can see I'm literally cutting as quick as I can across, and that is when we are able to spot a vehicle like the Chieftain. So we aim in, there you go, nice shot. You can see while the dispersion may not be great, as long as you have enough time to aim in, fairly easy shot into the side of that Chieftain. Now, I'm going to use that dead mouse carcass to block him from shooting me back, and there you go. Now I have been able to basically flank the enemy team, because vehicles like this 183 are not fast enough, so he bounces me, and we get a nice shot right into his frontal armor. That is one of the downsides of a vehicle like the 183, is down to the fact that it obviously has a very, very front-mounted hull with a rear-turreted design. So, a lot of people don't realize how far the front sticks out until they get shot, like that 183. So we're up to 1,300 damage so far. We've blocked 930. Now, to be fair, I didn't know that guy was there. He just snapped the shell because he probably didn't want to get shot by me. I'm going to get a nice shot into the Object 84. Was thinking about HEing him, but it's fine. It's a free 600 damage, bringing us up to just about 2,000. As you can see, the enemy 183 is not all too healthy anymore. And the great thing about being a super heavy is that you have a lot of HP. But even more specifically, it doesn't even matter, because I can just drive right around the corner. But at the moment, I was thinking, well, if this 183 is a shell, sure, he might take 1,000 off me, but I'll still have 1,900 hit points left, which is more than enough to deal with what's in front of us here. So at this moment, I've got 2 options. I can shoot an HE into the rear of the 57, or I can shoot the 50B. But the 57's not shooting at me, and I don't want to grab any unwanted attention. 2 autoloaders shooting at me? Yeah, that doesn't sound very exciting or enjoyable. So I'm just going to face hug this 50B. I know that this 50B is really going to struggle to pen me in a face hug because it doesn't have the most premium pen, especially if this player is running vents. So, taking advantage of that, he doesn't pen me at all. We get a nice clear onto him, and with that, we're up to 4,000 damage. You can see I backed up my tank in a way that Progetto couldn't actually see my rear. Now we're going to angle towards this 57 Heavy. Looks like he's out of shells. So, reloading again, we got the Progetto. Was going to pen him with an HE. We still did, but unfortunately didn't get that max damage out, as rolling about 500. Overall, this game was a very, very easy 4,500 damage dealt. Nothing crazy in terms of blocking, but in reality, when it comes to most battles in the E100, you don't really block that much. It's just a pushing machine. You keep on driving and driving. if you camp in an E100, you are playing it wrong. If you're not playing this tank frontline and taking shots for your teammates, you're playing it wrong. Now, that doesn't mean you should be sacrificing your health and just dying, but you should be the main vehicle in the front line. If you're on a map like Mayan Ruins, you should be at the front. If you're on a map like Mines, you shouldn't be sitting anywhere towards town. You should be right in that front of the hill, using your gun depression, angling the turret correctly, and taking the most shots for your team. That's why you've got those hit points. Why save your hit points to the end of the battle when your mediums and other lightly armored heavies are dead, when you could use them at the beginning and then just kind of stay a little bit less aggressive? You know, if you go down to 1,000 health, that's still 1,000 health. That's more than enough to take shells from the enemy team. So play this vehicle smart and aggressive at the same time. Overall, the E100 is an absolutely fantastic tier 10 heavy, and as long as you understand how to play it, you can do very well in it. Hopefully you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.